Hey guys, what's going on? John here, back again for another Magic the Gathering video, and in today's video I've got a great announcement. We have finally hit 50 subscribers, actually 51, because I gained 2 subscribers today. Um, so I just want to say thanks to all 51 of you people who have currently subscribed, but also I've noticed my most recent deck tech, which was the deck tech for Skitherix, the Blight Dragon, has been gaining a lot of video views, but also I noticed those people aren't subscribed. And if you want to see me make more Magic content, the best way to do that is to subscribe. So our next milestone is in fact 100 subscribers. I know, it's kind of huge. It's a massive accomplishment. Nobody's ever hit it before. But I'm really hoping we can get there much quicker than we got to 50, because 50 was kind of a, the old slow pace. But people have been really liking my content. So, for the 50 subscriber special, we've got a Commander deck tech again, because people really loved my last one, and it is Korvold Eats His Friend, starring Korvold Fae-Cursed King. So the Commander is, as I just said, Korvold Fae-Cursed King from Throne of Eldraine. He really likes eating his friends, as I said, eats them for value, actually, because whenever he eats his friends, he gets counters and you draw cards. So everybody is happy when Korvold eats his friends. I mean, except for his friends, but that's unimportant. Basically, what I'm trying to say is, Korvold really likes aristocrats-style decks. He loves sacrificing your own permanents to make himself huge, and we've built the deck around it. He's what I like to describe as a much less degenerate version of Prosh. So he's the casual player's Prosh. He has the same general archetypes, but he isn't as completely busted in a vacuum as Prosh. Anyway, as we're getting into the main deck, our first category is Friends for Korvold to Eat. And the first one on that list is Bloodghast. It's a 2-mana 2/1 vampire spirit. It can't block. Bloodghast has haste as long as an opponent has 10 or less life, and it has landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may return Bloodghast from your graveyard to the battlefield. It's so good in this deck. So good, because you just keep sacrificing it to Korvold, and then every time you get out of land, bam, it's back, you can sacrifice it again. You'll basically always be able to get your Bloodghast back onto the battlefield. Next up, we've got Grave Titan. It's a 6-mana 6/6 giant with Death Touch. When it enters the battlefield or attacks, put 2/2/2 black zombie creature tokens onto the battlefield. This just creates sacrifice fodder for Korvold. He himself is not the sacrifice fodder. You don't really want to be sacrificing your Grave Titan, although you can in a pinch. But the amount of sacrifice fodder he creates is great, especially since he has Death Touch, so your opponents really don't want to block him. Next up, we've got Nether Trader. It's a 2-mana 1/1 spirit with haste and shadow. Whenever another creature is put into your graveyard from play, you may pay 1 black. If you do, return Nether Trader from your graveyard to play. It's really as simple as that. Whenever you sacrifice another thing, you get him back and you can sacrifice him. He's really good. What can I say? We've got more friends for Korvold to eat. We've got a Reassembling Skeleton. It's a 2-mana 1/1 skeleton warrior. You can pay 2, return it from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. It's as simple as that. Great to sacrifice over and over, because you'll always have that 2 mana to give him back and sacrifice again. So he's a good, consistent source of value. Next up, we've got Solemn Simulacrum. It's 2 mana. It's 4 mana 2/2 artifact creature golem. When it enters the battlefield, you can search your library for a basic land card, put it in tapped, and shuffle your library. And when it's put into a graveyard, you draw a card. So you get it out turn 4, or hopefully earlier if you've got some other ramp, get a basic land, and then you can sacrifice it to Korvold the next turn to draw 2 cards when Korvold enters the battlefield. Next up, we've got Squee Goblin Nabob. It's a 3-mana 1/1 legendary creature goblin. At the beginning of your upkeep, you can return Squee from your graveyard to your hand. It's consistent. You're always going to be paying 3 mana for Squee. You know you'll get him back from the graveyard. Unless he goes into exile, you'll always have your Squee, and that's great in a sacrifice deck. Speaking of Squee, we've got 2 more friends to eat, and one of them is Squee the Immortal. It's a 3 mana 2/1 legendary creature goblin. You may cast Squee the Immortal from your graveyard or from exile. So, this, in my opinion, is better than Squee Goblin Nabob because you can cast him whenever you want. So it's not once a turn. So you can cast him from your graveyard as many times as you want as long as you've got the mana for it. And also he gets around graveyard hate. He gets around graveyard exiling effects like Bajuka Bog, which is run in just about every black deck in Commander. Finally, we've got Vengevine. It's a 4 mana 4/3 elemental with haste. Whenever you cast a spell, if it's the second creature spell you cast this turn, you may return Vengevine from your graveyard to the battlefield. Basically, you cast 2 creature spells, you get back your Vengevine. It's as simple as that. Again, it's reusable sacrifice fodder, just what this deck wants. Category 2 is our cooks, as I call them. It's basically more sacrifice outlets. Seeing as we've got a lot of things to sacrifice, and you'll see later we've got a lot of ways to generate value when we do sacrifice, what we want is other ways to sacrifice other than Korvold, and that's what we've got in our cooks over here. First up is Disciple of Bolas. It's a 4 mana 2/1 human wizard. When it enters the battlefield, sacrifice another creature, you gain X life and draw X cards, where X is that creature's power. So, say we sacrifice a Bloodghast, so we've paid 4 mana, gain X life, gain 2 life, draw 3 cards with Korvold out, and put a counter on Korvold. That's some damn good value for 4 mana, Disciple of Bolas. Next up is Gilded Goose. It's a 1 mana 0/2 bird. It's got flying. When it enters the battlefield, create a food token. You can pay 2 and tap it to create a food token, and you can tap it to sacrifice a food, add 1 mana of any color. It's sacrifice ramp. Literally the greatest thing to have in this deck. And it is a hugely useful asset in this deck. Next up is Greater Gargadon. It's a 10 mana 9/7 creature beast with suspend 10 for 1 red. You can sacrifice an artifact, creature, or land to remove a time counter from Greater Gargadon. Activate this ability only if Greater Gargadon is suspended. So, for a couple turns, you can use it for 1 mana, or as a reusable sacrifice outlet for no mana, as long as you just pay the 1 to get Greater Gargadon suspended. It's a great source of sacrifice outlet. Next up we've got Krav, the Unredeemed. It's a 5 mana 3/3 demon. It says partner with Regna the Redeemer. That's not important in our deck because Regna's in white, so we can't use her. And you can pay 1 black, sacrifice X creatures, target player draws X cards and gains X life, put X +1/+1 counters on Krav the Unredeemed. Huge value. You can sacrifice as many of your creatures as you want, draw a ton of cards, make Krav and Korvold huge. And that's exactly what we want to be doing. Next up is Plague Crafter. It's a 3 mana 3/2 human shaman. When it enters the battlefield, each player sacrifices a creature or planeswalker. Each player who can't discards a card. This is especially great in Korvold because it functions as removal, especially for pesky hex-proof creatures. And it also allows us a way to sacrifice a creature to put a counter on Korvold and draw a card. So it's good in the early game when our opponents have creatures we don't want on the battlefield and we can force them to sacrifice those creatures. And it's good in the late game for pumping Korvold and keeping up with our steady source of card advantage. Next up, we've got Priest of Forgotten Gods. It's a 2 mana 1/2 creature human cleric. You can tap it and sacrifice 2 other creatures. Any number of target players each lose 2 life and sacrifice a creature. You add 2 black and draw a card. This card is really good. You sacrifice 2 creatures by tapping it. First of all, you don't even have to pay anything except for tapping the priest to sacrifice 2 creatures. Already great. Your opponents lose 2 life and sacrifice a creature, so like a Plague Crafter effect, an Edict effect, and you add 2 black and draw a card. This is amazing. You're netting mana off of this, and you're sacrificing exactly what you want, and your opponents have to sacrifice, and you're drawing even more cards. This card is an all-star in this deck, and if your opponents sleep on the Priest, it can lock them out of the game within 2 or 3 turns of activations. The last couple of cooks, Prosh, Skyraider of Care, is a 6 mana, 5/5 legendary creature dragon with flying. When you cast it, you create X01 red kobolds, where X is the amount of mana spent to cast Prosh, and you can sacrifice another creature to make Prosh get +1/+0 until end of turn. Here's the thing with Prosh. He's a CDH commander, but we've put him in our normal EDH deck. This is because we're not using him with Food Chain. So he's not actually that busted. He's a really good sacrifice outlet, yes. But, again, he is a more degenerate version of our own commander, Korvold, and so I'd rather put him in the 99 than use him as our commander, just so our opponents and ourselves get to have more fun without Prosh coming out of nowhere and just wiping them out and ending the game. Next, we've got Sidisi, Undead Vizier. It's a 5 mana 4/6 legendary creature zombie naga with Death Touch and Exploit. When it exploits a creature, you demonic tutor. That's really good. You get to sacrifice a creature, which is great for value with Korvold and your other sacrifice payoffs. And you demonic tutor when you sacrifice that creature. Sidisi is a great card in most decks, but is especially good in this deck. Next up, we have Viscera Seer. It's a 1 mana 1/1 vampire wizard that reads sacrifice a creature, scry 1. It's as simple as that, but don't sleep on this card. This card is one of the best sacrifice outlets there is. 1 mana for a sacrifice outlet that is repeatable. You can do it any time, any amount of times each turn. And at instant speed, this is a great card, and it's a wonderful way to enable sacrifice decks, especially this one. Next up, we've got Cooking Pots. So it's like the cooks, but now we've got artifacts. Birthing Pod costs 3 and 1 Phyrexian green, so 4 mana for an artifact. It reads, pay 1 and a Phyrexian green, tap it, sacrifice a creature. Search your library for a creature card with converted mana cost equal to 1 plus the sacrificed creature's converted mana cost. Put it onto the battlefield and shuffle your library. Activate this only anytime you could cast a sorcery. So basically, Birthing Pod had to be banned in Modern because it's so good. This is not combo Birthing Pod. This is Birthing Pod so you can sacrifice a creature and get a bigger creature. It's as simple as that. It's a way to get us into bigger and bigger creatures every single time while sacrificing our creatures to generate us more value. Next up, we've got Ashnod's Altar. It's a 3 mana artifact that reads sacrifice a creature, add 2 colorless to your mana pool. It's just really good. It generates us ramp while also allowing us to sacrifice creatures to create value. Next up, we've got Culling Dice. It's a 2 mana artifact. You can tap it to sacrifice a creature, put a charge counter on Culling Dice, and you can pay 1, sacrifice Culling Dice, draw a card for each charge counter on Culling Dice. So it's a free sacrifice outlet that doesn't do anything at the time, but then it can sacrifice itself for that last little bit of sacrifice value and draw a ton of cards if you've been sacrificing creatures over multiple turns with the Culling Dice. Next up, the image on the left is not loading at the moment, so I'll start with the one in the middle. It's Skull Clamp. It's a 1 mana artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +1/-1. When equipped creature is put into a graveyard, draw 2 cards, and it has equip for 1. Next up, we've got Trading Post. It's a 4 mana artifact. Pay 1, tap it, discard a card, you gain 4 life. Pay 1, tap it, pay 1 life, put a 0/1 goat onto the battlefield. Pay 1, tap it, sacrifice a creature, return target artifact card from your graveyard to your hand. Pay 1, tap it, sacrifice an artifact, draw a card. It's mainly in there for the last 2 abilities because they sacrifice, but it's great at generating value, and it's so versatile, it's impossible not to put this in a sacrifice deck. Final card on this page is Phyrexian Altar, and although it hasn't loaded very much, it's a 3 mana artifact that reads sacrifice a creature, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. It's Ashnod's Altar, but more refined. It gives us colored mana rather than colorless at the downfall of only producing us 1 mana, but it's still okay because we sacrifice creatures. So we really want Phyrexian and Ashnod's Altar both in this deck. Next up, we've got our Enchanted Cooking. So it's more cooking, but this time with enchantments. First up, we have Attrition. It's a 3-mana enchantment that reads, pay 1 black, sacrifice a creature, destroy target non-black creature. So it's repeatable removal, and you get to sacrifice your own creatures to do it, only for the cost of 1 mana. That's a really good value card, and it does great work in our deck. Next up, Goblin Bombardment. It's a 2-mana enchantment that reads sacrifice a creature. Goblin Bombardment deals 1 damage to target creature or player. This is so versatile in our deck. It gets us to kill problematic creatures on our opponent's boards by sacrificing creatures, but also can come out of nowhere and kill your opponents if it looks like they're about to win, but they're at a lower life total. Goblin Bombardment can come out of nowhere and kill your opponents on the spot with the damage that's being dealt. So it's a repeatable sacrifice outlet, which is the main reason it's in the deck. But also, it functions as creature removal, planeswalker removal, and, if you need it, player removal. Next up, we've got Greater Good. It's a 4-mana enchantment that reads sacrifice a creature, draw cards equal to the sacrificed creature's power, then discard 3 cards. So obviously you need to sacrifice a creature with power 4 or greater to even net a single card, but it's still generating you decent card advantage, card selection through those cards you're looking through. So even if you don't necessarily net cards on it, just get a net of 0 or net lose 1, you still get great card selection. And again, it's a repeatable sacrifice outlet that allows us to draw through our deck to find pieces we need. Next up, we've got the Other Diners. So these are our sacrifice payoffs that really want our creatures to die because they do happy things. When our creatures die, they generate us so much value, and so we really want these on the battlefield with some sacrifice outlets and some creatures that recur themselves. That's basically the entire deck's game plan. The first one is Blood Artist. It's a 2-mana 0/1 vampire. Whenever it or another creature dies, not a creature you control, just another creature, target player loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So it's just a repeatable pinger when creatures die that can be really lethal in the face of a board wipe. Next up is Grim Haruspex. It's a 3-mana 3/2 human wizard with morph for 1 black. Whenever another non-token creature you control dies, draw a card. That's a lot of value because now every time you're sacrificing something with Korvold, you're drawing 2 cards instead of just 1. So that's great value for Korvold, and definitely a wonderful card in any sacrifice deck out there. Next up is Judith, the Scourge Diva. It's 3 mana for a 2/2 human shaman. Other creatures you control get +1/+0, so it's a great little anthem ability. And whenever a non-token creature you control dies, Judith deals 1 damage to any target. So, like Blood Artist, it's a repeatable pinger. Doesn't gain you life, but can remove your opponent's problematic creatures and be player removal in a pinch. Pawn of Ulamog is a 3-mana 2/2 vampire shaman. Whenever it or another non-token creature you control dies, you may create a 0/1 colorless Eldrazi spawn creature token with sacrifice this creature, add 1 colorless to your mana pool. This is a great card because it generates tons of mana when our creatures die, which is great for being able to replay our creatures because as we're spending mana through the turns, our recurable creatures do start to add up when their costs. And so to keep recurring those creatures, we need to generate value with the Pawn of Ulamog. And so that generates us the mana needed, and they sacrifice themselves for the mana. So you can get extra sacrifice triggers on Korvold. Next up is Pitiless Plunderer. It's 4 mana 1/4 human pirate. Whenever another creature you control dies, create a colorless treasure artifact token with tap, sacrifice this artifact, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. So it's a slightly better Pawn of Ulamog because you're sacrificing again with Pitiless Plunderer's tokens. So you're netting mana again, so it's good for the same reason as Pawn of Ulamog. And this adds 1 mana of any color, so it's good for paying Bloodghast costs, which cost 2 black. So if you need the black mana to repeatedly play the Bloodghast, Pitiless Plunderer's treasure tokens provide that mana. Next up is Sifter of Skulls. It's a 4-mana 4/3 Eldrazi with Devoid. And whenever another non-token creature you control dies, put a 1/1 colorless Eldrazi creature token onto the battlefield. It has sacrifice this creature. Add 1 colorless to your mana pool. This is basically another Pawn of Ulamog, except slightly worse. Yes, the creatures have 1 more power, but it costs 1 more mana, and it doesn't do it when it itself dies. So that is slightly unfortunate, but still, it's repeatability on this effect that we see here, and that's really good. Next up, we've got Tireless Tracker. It's a 3-mana, 3/2 Human Scout. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, investigate. And whenever you sacrifice a clue, put a +1/+1 counter on it. So, your clues generate you card advantage with your lands, and whenever you're sacrificing those clues, which you will be doing, you put counters on Tireless Tracker. So you're drawing. So each time you pay 2 to sacrifice a clue, and even if you only have Tireless Tracker out and Korvold, you're drawing 2 cards and pumping both of your creatures with a +1/+1 counter. That's some insane value to me. Next up, we've got Dictate of Erebos. It's a 5-mana enchantment with flash. Whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent sacrifices a creature. Basically, I sacrifice. Oh, now all of you have to sacrifice. Really good because it allows you to control the entire board. Grave Pact is a 4-mana enchantment. Whenever a creature you control is put into a graveyard from play, each other player sacrifices a creature. Same thing as Dictate of Erebos. 1 less mana at the cost of not having flash and costing 1 more colored mana, but still really good. The fact that there are 2 cards printed with this effect is seriously amazing, and our deck looks to take huge advantage of that. Next up, we've got a nice salad. This salad is... I'm liking this salad, honestly. You know, on a cool day, you might need a nice crisp salad, and we've got that right here in our ramp. So first up, we've got Burnished Heart. It's a 3-mana 2/2 elk that reads, you can pay 3, sacrifice Burnished Heart, search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, put them onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. Gives you lands, and sacrifices Burnished Heart, which can come into great effect when Korvold is on the battlefield later in the game. Next up is Dockside Extortionist. It's a 2-mana 1/2 Goblin Pirate. When Dockside Extortionist enters the battlefield, create X treasure tokens, where X is the number of artifacts and enchantments your opponents control. Dockside Extortionist is able to generate you tons of treasure tokens, which is really great. They create a ton of mana, and those treasure tokens sacrifice themselves for mana, which allows Korvold to get buffed every time we sacrifice a treasure for mana. Next up, we've got Sakura Tribe Elder. It's a 2-mana 1/1 Snake Shaman. You can sacrifice Sakura Tribe Elder, search your library for a basic land card, put that card on the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. Gets you lands, sacrifices itself, great value, and you can do it at instant speed in response to anything happening. Next up is Springbloom Druid. It's a 3-mana creature, elf druid. It's a 1/1. When it enters the battlefield, you can sacrifice a land. If you do, search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, put them on the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle your library. So you sacrifice 1 land, which is good with Korvold, because Korvold wants you to do that, and then you get 2 lands. So you're basically getting 2 at the price of sacrificing a single one of your lands. Harrow is a 3-mana instant that does the same thing as Springbloom Druid, except in instant form without a creature tacked onto it. Next up, we've got Arcane Signet. It's a 2-mana artifact, taps for 1 mana of any color in Korvold's colors, so that will be 1 mana in Jund colors. Yeah, that is a lot of salad. We're continuing with our salad. Coalition Relic. It's 3-mana artifact. Tap, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Tap, put a charge counter on Coalition Relic. At the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, remove all charge counters from Coalition Relic. Add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool for each counter removed this way. So you can tap it for a color the first turn it comes out, or you can decide to put a charge counter on it, and next turn it'll produce 2 mana instead of 1. Next up, we've got Golgari Signet, Gruul Signet, and Rakdos Signet. All 3 signets in our colors that are 2-mana artifacts, and you can pay 1 and tap it for each of their 2 colors, respectively. So Golgari is black and green, Gruul Signet is red and green, and Rakdos Signet is black and red. So we've still got more salad. Don't go away. We've got Soul Ring, 1 mana artifact, tap, add 2 colorless. It's pretty simple. It's the commander staple. Thought Vessel, 2 mana artifact, tap, add 1 to your mana pool. 1 colorless, that is. And you have no maximum hand size, so great since we're drawing a ton of cards with Korvold. We don't want to have to discard all these cards because some of them will be really good, and we don't want to discard those really good cards. Salad the 5th. Yes, we have had 5 different slides worth of salad. That's 15 cards, if you were counting, but I'm not. Cultivate is a 3-mana sorcery. Search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, reveal those cards, put 1 onto the battlefield tapped, the other into your hand, shuffle up. Kodama's Reach is a 3-mana sorcery arcane that does the exact same thing as Cultivate. Nature's Lore is 2-mana sorcery. Search your deck for a forest and put that card into play. Shuffle your deck afterwards. That is better than Rampant Growth, first of all, because although it can only get forests, it gets them untapped. It doesn't say it comes onto the battlefield tapped, and it's also good because even though Rampant Growth can get you a basic land of any color, Nature's Lore can fetch you shock lands because they have the subtype of forest. So in this deck, it could get us a Stomping Ground, or it could get us an Overgrown Tomb. Next up, we've got Korvold's Anger. Don't take away his food. He will get angry. And it seems like our opponents want to take away his food. So, we must rain Korvold's anger upon them. We've got Bedevil. It's a 3-mana instant. Destroy target artifact, creature, or planeswalker. Some great unconditional removal. Chaos Warp is a 3-mana instant. The owner of target permanent shuffles it into his or her library, then reveals the top card of his or her library. If it's a permanent, he or she puts it on the battlefield. It's great removal, although it does allow them to get other permanents. It's 3-mana removal in red. Definitely a great addition to the deck. Blasphemous Act is a 9-mana sorcery. This spell costs 1 less to cast for each creature on the battlefield. Blasphemous Act deals 13 damage to each creature. It's a huge board wipe. 13 damage. There's not much surviving that except for possibly Korvold. If we have buffed up Korvold enough with his own sacrifice ability, Korvold could survive a Blasphemous Act. And that would leave your opponents in a really bad situation, because that means you've got a Korvold that's at least a 14/14 with nothing else on the board because of the Blasphemous Act, about to smash someone in the face for at least 14 commander damage. That's gotta hurt. Next up, Korvold is still angry. Stop making Korvold angry. He's mad. So he's going to Maelstrom Pulse your stuff. That's 3 mana for a sorcery. Destroy target non-land permanent and all other permanents with the same name as that permanent. Great unconditional removal. Artifacts, enchantments, planeswalkers, and creatures. You can hit them all. And also, it's great against token decks because if they've got some real problematic tokens, such as like a bunch of token copies of a creature, well, Maelstrom Pulse the one creature, now they're all gone. The solution is right in this card. Next up, we've got Vandal Blast. It's a 1-mana sorcery. Destroy target artifact you don't control with Overload for 5. Blows up all your opponent's artifacts. That's a really, really fun one. It's like Cyclonic Rift in red, but not. Yeah, that's pretty much it. We've got miscellaneous other value now because, well, when you're a Korvold deck, there's a lot of value you can get. So we've got Eternal Witness. It's 3 mana for a 2/1 creature human shaman. When it comes into play, you get a card from your graveyard to hand. Any card, graveyard to hand, So great value. Eternal Witness is a must-have in any green commander deck. Next up, we've got Mikaeus the Unhallowed, also known as Mike. It's a 6-mana, 5/5 legendary creature zombie cleric with Intimidate. Whenever a human deals damage to you, destroy it. And other non-human creatures you control get +1/+1 and have Undying. Basically, all our creatures that we can sacrifice, now we can sacrifice them twice each time because they come back with a +1/+1 counter on it. Obviously, that's an issue with Korvold because his Undying never triggers because he will have counters on him. But it's still great because it works with the rest of our sacrifice outlets. Next up is From Beyond. It's a 4-mana enchantment with Devoid. At the beginning of your upkeep, put a 1/1 colorless Eldrazi Scion creature token onto the battlefield with sacrifice this creature, add 1 colorless to your mana pool. And the last ability doesn't have any use in this deck, but you can pay 2, sacrifice From Beyond, search your library for an Eldrazi card, reveal it, put it in your hand, then shuffle. Obviously, if you're really in a pinch, you can sacrifice it to draw cards with Korvold, but a lot of the times this is just here to create mana that sacrifices itself. So, we get a lot of value out of From Beyond. It's a little expensive, but still generates enough value to justify it being in the deck. Next up, we've got Haunted Crossroads. It's a 3-mana enchantment that reads, pay 1 black, put target creature card from your graveyard on top of your library. How is this card only $1.61? I mean, am I the only one who's ever seen this card? Because you can pay 1 to get creatures back from your graveyard. So, say Mike dies. Oh, that sucks. Mike's dead. Wait, you've got Haunted Crossroads. You pay 1 to get him on top of your library, sacrifice something, now he's in your hand, now you can play him. It's as simple as that. So, I mean, this card is insane value, and I don't know how it's $1.61, especially since its only printing was way back in Mercadian Masks. Next up, we've got Phyrexian Arena. It's a 3-mana enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, you draw a card and you lose a life. It's extra draw step, basically, at the cost of 1 life. That's fun. Next up is Whisper Silk Cloak. It's a 3-mana equipment. Equipped creature is unblockable and can't be the target of spells or abilities. So, equipped creature is unblockable and has Shroud. And it equip for 2 mana. Basically, it stops Korvold from being targeted by spells, and Korvold can get through any pesky little blockers in the air that our opponents might have. More miscellaneous value, Demonic Tutor. 2-mana sorcery, search your library for a card, put it in your hand, then shuffle your library. It's super expensive, but, it's 2 mana to get any card in your deck. Wow, that's great. And by the way, I will insert here because I forgot to mention it at the start of the video. This deck is quite expensive, but that's because I'm actually deck ticking one of my own decks. This isn't a deck I have created for specifically this video. This is a deck I've created for myself to play. So you guys know that this deck is great. You guys know that this deck is great because I own this deck. I have it right to my right over here. So I own this deck, and that's why I'm giving it to you guys, because it's such a special deck to me, because I really like it. It's an evolution of a Judith deck I was planning on making, and when Korvold was spoiled, I was like, wow, this is a fun way to add green to the deck and make it so much better and more fun for me. And so I'm giving this to you guys as my 50 subscriber special. Anyway, moving on. We've got Yawgmoth's Will. It's 3-mana sorcery that costs $71.87. Oh my god, that's so expensive. Yeah, I know, it's super expensive. I traded for my copy of Yawgmoth's Will. You can sub in any other recursion piece or sacrifice outlet or something in here for Yawgmoth's Will, because I know this guy is real expensive. But he allows you to play cards from your graveyard as though they were in your hand, and if anything is put into your graveyard this turn, it gets exiled instead. So basically you get back anything in your graveyard that you want. Creature related, you can cast instants again. It snapcasters a bunch of your stuff, basically. That's super great. Next up is Vraska Golgari Queen. It's a 4-mana legendary planeswalker Vraska. +2, you can sacrifice another permanent. If you do, you gain a life and you draw a card. -3, destroy target non-land permanent with converted mana cost 3 or less. And -9 you get an emblem with whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, that player loses the game. So basically, repeatable sacrifice outlet every turn with the +2, gaining you card advantage and gaining you life. -3, unconditional removal for some cheap permanents. And -9, an alternate win con that literally says, you get poked by my 1/1, you die now. Starts at 4 loyalty, and it's a great card. It was at 1920 on the making of this video, but it's going to come down after the banning of Oko Thief of Crowns in Standard. Next up is the mana base. I've just got it out right here because it would take forever to do the mana base, and I'm not putting you guys through it. I've got a list right here. You can screenshot this, and obviously the deck list will be below, so you can see all the lands here. We've got Ancient Tomb, the 3 shock lands in our colors, Bloodstained Mire and Wooded Foothills, 2 fetch lands in our colors from cons, because they're both super cheap in relation to the other ones, 2 Battle for Zendikar check lands, Command Tower, 3 Ixalan or Dominaria checks, Evolving Wilds, Terramorphic Expanse, Fabled Passage, and Prismatic Vista as all of our, I guess, basic land fetches. The 3 filter lands in our colors, the 3 pain lands in our colors, Nurturing Peatland, which is the only horizon land in our colors, 3 forests, 1 mountain, and 5 swamps, and finally the ones we've got pictures of on screen, which I want to talk about a little more, are Lotus Veil and Scorched Ruins. These cards are great because it's with Lotus Veil, it's basically like having a Lotus Field. And what it does is the way its triggers are stacked, it's not a cast trigger, and it's not an alternate cost. It says when Lotus Veil enters the battlefield, sacrifice 2 untapped lands or sacrifice Lotus Veil, and it taps to add 3 mana of any one color to your mana pool. Here's the issue. You play it, it doesn't come in tapped. So you choose to sacrifice Lotus Veil, and in response to that ability triggering, you tap it to add 3 mana of any one color. Bam, you've got a Black Lotus in your land drop. Wow. Mind blown. Scorched Ruins does the same thing except for 4 colorless mana. These lands are amazing. They're quite expensive, both around $15 to $20, but they're so worth it. Your land drop generates you 3 or 4 mana a turn. What? That is insane. Plus, they sacrifice themselves. So, you get more value when they sacrifice themselves. These cards are great in this deck. Anyway, that's all, folks. This is a really, really fun deck. I'm in the process of building it, so I guess I kind of lied when I said I have it to my right. I do have it to my right. It's not complete. I'm getting the last couple cards I need for it. But yeah, it's a super fun deck. Quite expensive, but so worth it if you can build it. And yeah, that's just about all I've got for the deck today. Make sure to like this video and subscribe if you haven't already. Again, tons of people have been watching my videos that aren't subscribed right now, and why are you doing that? Subscribe if you enjoy my videos, which people seem to do because I've received some nice comments. Then subscribe to the channel because the only reason I'm able to find out if you enjoy these videos is if you slap a like on the video. It's the only way I know. Anyway, also make sure to put on that notification bell so you don't miss a single new upload, because my videos seem to be slow getting off the ground a lot of the time in viewership. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this deck tech. Thank you very much for 50 subscribers, and I will see you later.